Chapter 1, Dust and Destiny. The prairie sun bled its last light across the horizon, turning the sky the color of embers. Dust hung heavy in the air, stirred by wagon wheels and horses' hooves, clinging to every breath like grit against the tongue. Clara Mayfield stepped off the stagecoach, clutching a worn carpet bag to her chest, her bonnet shielding her from the long stares of the men lounging outside the saloon. The town of Red Rock was alive with noise, the sharp laugh of saloon girls spilling out into the street, the jangle of piano keys fighting against the rise of rowdy voices, the bark of a gambler boasting about his winnings. Boots scuffed over the creaking boardwalk, and spurs clinked like the ticking of a clock that measured out danger instead of time. Clara kept her chin high, though her heart pounded. She had run far from her uncle's grasp, and every step into this wild, lawless town felt like stepping into a storm. Inside the saloon, smoke curled thick as a veil, blurring lamplight into golden haze. Clara's shoes clicked uncertainly across the wooden floor, and the chatter softened, turning curious, then sharp with whispers. A young woman, fresh-faced, untouched by saloon life, she didn't belong. She felt in the heat of their gazes, the sly grins, the way men leaned back in their chairs to watch her pass. But one man did not leer. Jonah Kane sat in the far corner, hat tilted low, the shadow hiding half his face. His long frame was relaxed, but his hand rested near the butt of his revolver as though out of habit. The moment Clara entered, his head lifted, and his eyes, gray as storm clouds gathered on the horizon, locked with hers. She froze, breath catching, as if the dusty room had vanished, and only those eyes remained. Something in his gaze held her still, not cruelty, not hunger, but recognition, like he had been waiting for her all along. Clara gripped her bag tighter and forced herself toward the bar. Her voice faltered and steadied. I need work. The store, maybe the inn? The bartender, polishing a glass, shrugged. Town don't take kindly to strangers. Before Clara could answer, Jonah's voice cut through the murmur. Low, steady, carrying across the room like a chord struck on a church bell. She'll find her place. Every head turned. Jonah rose from his chair, boots thudding heavy against the floorboards, spurs chiming with each step. He stopped beside her, close enough for her to smell the dust and leather clinging to him, close enough to feel the quiet power in the way he carried himself. Clara's heart raced, torn between fear and a strange, unexplainable pull. Jonah tipped his hat to her, his mouth curving just slightly at the corner. Name's Kane, he said. Jonah Kane. And you, miss, you just found your destiny. Chapter 2, The Cowboy's Claim. Morning broke in Red Rock with the clang of a blacksmith's hammer and the creak of wagon wheels grinding over hard-packed earth. Clara Mayfield, her bonnet tied tight against the dust, arranged jars on the shelf of the general store where she had begged work the night before. Her hands trembled as she worked, not from the labor, but from the memory of storm-gray eyes that followed her every move in the saloon. Jonah Kane. She told herself she was safe here, yet the weight of her uncle's shadow lingered like a chill down her spine. He would come for her. She knew it. The door banged open with a jingle of the bell. Clara startled, nearly dropping a jar of molasses. 3 men sauntered in, their hats low, their boots caked with trail dust. Their smiles were too sharp, too knowing. Well, one drawled, stepping too close. Ain't this the runaway niece of Mr. Mayfield? Thought you could vanish into the dust, girl? Clara's throat tightened. She backed against the counter, her voice faltering. I don't belong to him. Not anymore. The man's grin widened, yellow teeth flashing. Belong? Oh, sweetheart, blood says different. He paid us to fetch you. His hand darted, fingers catching her wrist like iron. The storekeeper froze, silent, his eyes dropping to the floorboards. No help would come from him. Clara's heart thudded in her chest. She twisted, tried to pull free, and then the air shifted, boot steps heavy, spurs ringing steady as a death knell. Jonah Kane filled the doorway, broad shoulders framed by the morning light. Dust swirled around him, as though even the wind bowed to his presence. "Let her go," Jonah said. His voice carried the calm of a man who had faced death too often to flinch. The men stiffened. One spat on the floor. "This ain't your concern, Kane." Jonah's eyes narrowed, hand resting lazy-like on a revolver at his hip. "Everything in this town's my concern, when it comes to her." For a long breath, no one moved. The world seemed to still. The crackle of the stove, the chirp of birds outside, even Clara's own heartbeat. Then, slowly, the man released her wrist. He muttered a curse, and the three shoved past Jonah, retreating into the street. Clara sagged against the counter, her skin burning where the rough fingers had gripped her. She looked up at Jonah, words caught somewhere between gratitude and disbelief. He tipped his hat back, eyes softening when they met hers. "They'll come again, Clara. Men like that don't quit easy." He stepped closer, his voice dropping low, meant for her alone. "But you're under my protection now, and I'll tell you plain." He paused, his hand brushing the edge of her bonnet, a touch so careful it ached. "I've imagined you 1,000 ways, Clara," Jonah whispered, the way of confession in every syllable. "And always you carry my child." The word struck her like thunder rolling over the plains. Terrifying, impossible, yet stirring something deep inside she couldn't name. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Outside, the wind carried the lonely howl of a coyote across the prairie. Inside, Clara stood trembling, caught between fear of the man before her and the strange, dangerous hope that rose in her chest. Chapter 3. Between Gunpowder and Gentle Hands. The sun hung low over the prairie, its heat still clinging to the earth as Clara clutched the reins of Jonah Kane's sorrel mare. Dust swirled with every hoofbeat, clinging to her skirts, but her eyes stayed forward, narrowed with determination. Life on Jonah's ranch was nothing like the sheltered world she'd known before. Every day demanded something of her: strength, courage, patience. Jonah rode beside her, straight back in the saddle, one hand resting easy on the horn. He watched without a word as she tried to guide the horse around corral. When she pulled too sharply and the mare balked, Clara bit her lip, fighting tears of frustration. Jonah finally spoke, his voice low and steady. "Easy now. Horses don't answer to fear, Clara. They answer to trust. Let her feel you mean what you ask." Clara drew a breath, loosened her grip, and the mare moved forward, steady and smooth. Relief washed through her, and she allowed herself the faintest smile. Jonah's eyes softened. "That's it. See? She listens to you." They worked until the sun bled red along the horizon. Sweat streaked Clara's brow, but pride warmed her chest. She had done something hard and lived through it. Maybe she could live through more. When evening came, they rode into town for supplies. The saloon blazed with lamplight and piano music, voices spilling out into the dusty street. Jonah tied his horse, but the moment they stepped inside, conversation faltered. The smoky air filled with whispers. Men leaned forward, watching the young woman on Jonah Kane's arm. A voice rang out from the back, sharp with malice. "Well, if it ain't Kane's little bride," sneered Hank Mercer, a rival rancher with a crooked grin. "Tell me, girl, you that desperate for a place you'll throw in with a man like him?" The room erupted in coarse laughter. Clara froze, her face burning, every eye cutting into her like knives. Jonah moved before she could speak. His boots struck the floorboards like thunder as he crossed the room. In a single motion, he slammed Mercer against the bar, his forearm pinning the man's chest. The laughter died, silence heavy as gun smoke. "You don't speak her name, Jonah growled, voice rough as gravel. Not now, not ever. Mercer spat blood, but the sneer faded when Jonah's revolver pressed against his ribs. The tension snapped like a drawn bowstring, and with a shove, Jonah released him. Mercer stumbled, humiliated, glaring but silent. Jonah turned back to Clara. His jaw was tight, but when his gaze met hers, something gentler flickered there. He offered his hand. "Come on," he said softly, leading her out of the saloon into the cool night air. Outside, the sky stretched wide and star-pierced. The wind carried the scent of sagebrush, and from a distance came the mournful cry of a coyote. Clara's hand trembled in his, but she did not pull away. Jonah glanced at her, the lamplight of town fading behind them. "You'll learn this, Clara. Out here, respect don't come easy. But I'll fight for yours until my last breath." Her throat ached with unspoken words. She only nodded, her heart racing, knowing that in his fierce defense lay not just honor, but something far more dangerous, something that felt like love. Chapter 4, Secrets in the Dust. The prairie wind carried the faint perfume of sage as Clara stood on the porch of Jonah's ranch house, the last traces of twilight painting the sky in strokes of violet and gold. She wrapped her shawl tighter, but it wasn't the cool night that made her shiver. It was a storm she could feel building inside Jonah Kane. He had been distant since the saloon fight. His silence is heavier than usual, his eyes shadowed. Clara sensed something haunted him, something he hadn't said. She found him by the corral, leaning against the fence, a bottle of whiskey dangling loosely from his hand. The horses shifted restlessly, catching the unease in their master. "Jonah," she called softly. He didn't look at her right away. The bottle tilted, then lowered to the ground. "You ought to keep your distance, Clara. You don't know what you've tied yourself to." Her heart tightened, but she stepped closer anyway. "Then tell me. Don't keep me in the dark." His jaw clenched, and for a long moment, only the distant howl of coyotes filled the night. Finally he spoke, voice low, ragged. "I once loved a woman. Thought she was my future. She sold me out to a rival, left me for dead in the desert with 2 bullets in my side. Since then, I don't trust easy, and I swore I'd never let my heart be fooled again." Clara's breath caught. Pain lanced through her, not jealousy, but fear that she could never be enough to heal such wounds. She turned away, blinking against the sting of tears. "Maybe you were right," she whispered. "Maybe I don't belong here. Maybe I never will." Jonah pushed from the fence, crossing the distance between them in 3 strides. His hand caught her wrist, firm, but trembling with the force of what he felt. "Don't say that." Their eyes met in the moonlight, shadows cutting across his face. He looked raw, undone, like a man stripped bare of every armor. "You scare me more than a loaded gun, Clara. Because with you, I want to believe again." Before she could answer, a distant rumble of hooves broke the moment. Lights flared on the ridge, lanterns carried by riders. Clara's stomach dropped when she saw the lead man's silhouette. Her uncle. He had found her. Jonah's grip tightened, protective now. His voice turned steel. "He won't take you, Clara. Not while I draw a breath." She pressed closer, her fear tempered by the fire in his words. For the first time since fleeing her uncle, she felt the strength to stand her ground. The night held its breath around them, the scent of dust and danger heavy in the air. Whatever came at dawn, they would face it together. Chapter 5, Bullets at Dawn. Dawn crept slow over the plains, the horizon bruised with red and gold. The ranch lay hushed, but Clara had not slept. She stood by the window, fingers twisted in the curtain, watching lanterns flicker on the ridge where her uncle's men had camped. They were waiting for morning, waiting to take her back in chains of blood and fear. Behind her, Jonah buckled his gun belt with practiced ease, the rasp of leather loud in the silence. His face was calm, But she saw the storm in his eyes, saw how his jaw flexed as though clenching against words he could not say. "Jonah," her voice trembled. "There are too many. You can't fight them all." He pulled his hat low and looked at her, his gaze steady, unflinching. A man don't count the odds when what he's fighting for is worth more than his life. He touched her cheek briefly, his callous thumb gentle as a prayer. "Stay inside, no matter what you hear." But Clara shook her head, her fear burned away by something fiercer. "I won't hide. Not again. Not while they try to take everything from us." His lips parted, as if to protest, but before he could speak, the first gunshot cracked the morning open. Bullets splintered the fence posts. Horses screamed in the corral. Jonah grabbed Clara's hand, pulling her behind the water trough as dust exploded from the ground around them. The uncle rode at the front, his face twisted with rage. "Clara!" His voice cut across the gunfire. "You come now, or I'll burn this ranch to the ground." Jonah rose from cover, revolver drawn. His voice was iron. "She ain't yours to take." The battle was chaos. Hoofs pounding, guns roaring, smoke and dust choking the air. Jonah moved like a man born of gunpowder. Each shot fired with deadly precision. Clara, heart hammering, darted to the barn to fetch the old rifle Jonah had shown her once in passing. Her hand shook, but she braced it against the doorframe, sighted on a rider about to flank Jonah, and pulled the trigger. The man fell. The rifle kicked hard against her shoulder, but Clara didn't falter. Jonah glanced back, eyes wide with something between shock and pride. "That's my girl," he muttered before turning back to the fight. When the dust cleared, bodies lay scattered in the pale dawn light. The uncle knelt on the ground, clutching a bleeding arm, his men scattered or dead. He spat at the dirt, hatred burning in his glare. "She'll ruin you, Cain. Mark me." Jonah cut him off, pressing the barrel of his revolver close. "You don't get to speak her name." But Clara stepped forward, her voice trembling yet strong. "No, Jonah. Let him crawl away with his bitterness. He's already lost." Jonah lowered the gun. The uncle staggered to his horse and fled into the horizon, swallowed by the rising sun. Only then did Jonah sink to one knee, blood darkening his shirt. Clara dropped beside him, cradling his face with shaking hands. Tears mixed with dust as she whispered, "Don't you dare leave me. I can't imagine this life without you." He smiled faintly, wincing. "Told you before, Clara? I've imagined you 1,000 ways. And every one of 'em you're mine." The words bound them tighter than any vow, sealed in blood and sunrise. Chapter 6. The future they fought for. The prairie was quiet again, though the earth still bore scars of the battle. Splintered posts, trampled dust, and blood darkening the ground where men had fallen. Clara sat on the porch steps of the ranch house, her skirts torn, her hands raw from pulling Jonah back inside after fight. The dawn sun spread gold over the land, burning away the smoke and sorrow. Jonah lay stretched on a cot in the parlor, his shirt torn open, bandages tight across his side where the bullet had grazed him. He had refused a doctor, stubborn as ever, claiming he'd seen worse. Clara tended him with trembling hands, rinsing the blood away, her tears falling freely as she worked. "You should rest," Jonah murmured, his voice low, roughened by pain yet threaded with that quiet strength that had first unsettled and then steadied her heart. Clara shook her head fiercely. "I nearly lost you. Do you think I could close my eyes after that?" He reached for her hand, his grip weak but determined. His thumb brushed across her knuckles, smearing dust and dried blood. "I told you before, Clara, I don't make promises I can't keep. You're safe now. Safe here with me." Her throat tightened, her words spilling before she could stop them. "But for how long, Jonah? You carry danger with you everywhere. A man like you, your enemies won't ever quit." His gray eyes opened, clear and steady despite the pain. He held her gaze until the world seemed to still. Then let him come. I've walked this earth half dead, but when you came into that saloon, Clara, you gave me back something I thought I'd lost. A reason. A future. She blinked through her tears, her heart pounding. A future? A faint smile touched his lips, softening the hard lines of his face. A ranch that don't stand empty. A woman I can come home to when the sun sets. Children laughing in these fields. Every time I close my eyes, I see it. And always, Clara, you're carrying my child in that dream. Her tears spilled over, but they weren't only grief now. They were hope, wild, terrifying, beautiful hope. She bent over him, pressing her forehead to his, breathing in the scent of dust, leather, and the faint copper tang of blood. I want that too, she whispered. All of it. If it means this land, this life, and you, I'll take the danger with the joy. Outside, the prairie stretched wide and endless, the wind carrying the scent of sage and the song of distant coyotes. The ranch stood battered but unbroken, just like the two who now clung to each other within its walls. Jonah's arm circled her waist, pulling her down to him with surprising strength for a wounded man. His lips brushed hers, sealing the vow neither had spoken outright but both had chosen: to fight, to love, to build. As the sun rose higher, casting long golden rays over the ranch, Clara knew the future they had bled for was no longer just a dream. It had begun. The sun bled low across the plains, setting the world aflame in gold and crimson. Dust drifted on the evening wind, carrying with it the scent of sagebrush and the faint echoes of saloon piano from town. The battle was behind them now. The uncle gone, his men scattered, the ranch scarred but standing proud against the horizon. Clara stood on the porch, skirts swaying in the breeze, watching as Jonah led the last of the horses into the corral. He moved slower now, his side bound in fresh bandages, but his frame was unbroken, his presence as steady as the land itself. When he returned, he paused beside her, eyes on the setting sun. For a moment, silence wrapped around them, heavy and tender. Then Jonah reached for her hand, rough palm closing over her fingers. "We've seen fire, blood, and the edge of death," he murmured, voice low, shaped by the wind. He turned to her, his storm-gray gaze soft with something fierce and eternal. "But, Clara, every road I take, every dream I've had, it all leads here. To you." Her breath trembled, tears stinging her eyes. She leaned against him, her hand resting on his chest where his heartbeat steadied her own. "And I to you," she whispered. They kissed as the sky deepened to twilight, their silhouettes framed by the wide, wild west. Behind them stretched hardship, ahead the promise of family. And in that moment, they knew they had found forever